think there's enough of us at the table now. So, James, over to you.
Kia ora koutou. So this is an extended version of what we discussed this morning, an update on Town Hall in Matapihi. To be honest, we were intending to put off this discussion until the 4th of September because one of my colleagues, Fars, who's the program manager for Ngākau, is on holiday at the moment overseas. And while that's vaguely inconvenient from a conducting business perspective, it was all planned in advance, and so it hasn't impacted the project at all. But the net is he's not here, and so that's why we were kind of hoping to do this at the beginning of September. So Fars in particular has been taking the lead on the Ngākau development plan and some of the broader aspects of the Ngākau project. So having him in the room would be actually kind of useful when you're asking questions, etc. So what we'll do is we'll focus on some of the development plan stuff on the 4th of September, and this time we'll focus primarily on the two key projects of Te Matapihi and Town Hall. Now, with me today I have Yeston, who you all know, Yeston Burke, who runs our Manager Capital Projects, and Scott Evans.
From RCP, who's a project manager for both projects.
Yeah. So again, another person who would normally be here would be Paul Paniski, who's our project manager on both Te Matapihi and Town Hall, but his son is playing soccer for New Zealand, and so he's not in the country at the moment. Or football, as they keep telling me to say when I go to England. So we'll spend probably 20 to 30 minutes just going through some brief slides to give you an update of where things are at. I will touch on various aspects of Te Ngākau as well, but primarily as an opportunity for you to get an understanding of where we're at with the two key projects and ask questions about them. And Scott, as the RCP project manager, obviously has a lot of good solid technical knowledge about where we're at and the progress that we're making, etc. As I said this morning, I feel it's a good news story on both projects. I'm always slightly hesitant when I say that in front of the people who really know, but certainly that's the message that we've been getting more recently, isn't it, Scott?
Yeah, and the library's been going well for a long time, and the town hall's definitely heading in the right direction, so lots of positive signs. You know, there's still a lot of work to go, but yeah, it's definitely looking positive.
Okay, so I'll skip over to the next slide. Thank you. So this slide is kind of a summary of everything, quite honestly. Te Matapihi due for completion around about February 2026, and that is definitely on track. So we're now at the stage where we're just over 18 months away from that. So it's starting to get quite real now for the project team. The construction obviously has been doing all of the running, and that's where the focus has been over the last couple of years, but now it's moving much more into what we call the client or the user side and thinking about how we get the books and things back into the library, how we're using the spaces, the various different stakeholders that we've got who will be working in there with us, so Capital E, the archives, and some of the other elements that we're bringing into the library as well. So the cafeteria, obviously on the ground floor, etc. So all of those plans are now starting to firm up, and we're really on a bit of a countdown cycle because 18 months will go quite quickly from this point. The town hall, our project plan would say that it's due for completion in 2027, and we would say first quarter 2027. If you look closely at that plan, you would see that there's quite a lot of risk and contingency built into that. So depending on how the project progresses from this point forward, there's a chance that we can pull that project back into 2026. But Scott can talk to more of that a bit later on. So cab and mob, you would have seen the cab building, the deconstruction or demolition has begun. It'll be over before we know it, quite honestly, because of the pace they're going. Saw a number of photographs of the demolition from inside and out yesterday, and you can see how quickly they're making progress. We talk about this concept of soft strip out. which is really preparing the building for demolition. And you can see the value of that because when you start then doing the hard demolition, how quickly the team can move once they've figured out what the right scheme is and they've got all the other stuff out of the way, and they can just smash it down quite quickly. I think they were talking about a floor every 2 weeks or something. Is that right? Yeah, which is quite fast. The soft strip out of the mob building has started as well. The structural demolition of that is expected in the new calendar year, so starting around about February. And then in terms of the replacement, Fars and Yeston have been leading the discussions with Precinct Properties around a development agreement for that. So the team is working over the next few months on key terms, and we'll bring those back to Council most likely this side of Christmas, I would say. Yep. And as I mentioned this morning, the draft Ngākau development plan will be presented to Council on the 4th of September. And also, just reiterating what I said this morning, the plan itself, generated by architects in consultation with us, with what we're doing with the various different sites, with the Ngākau framework and the direction that we've received from Council, come up with a number of ideas and visuals for what that space will look like to try and make it as tangible as possible. As they do that, they have to consider options for different spaces around Ngākau. So in that plan, there is no scripted agenda or set of decisions at all, but it does show options such as developments in different parts of the square that aren't there at the moment. And then in regards to the rest of Ngākau Square, as you know, the former Capital E building has a MBS of 15%. The regulatory date to deal with that was June 2027. We're expecting that to be increased by 4 years, and that provides us some options in terms of when we actually want to do that work and what fits with the rest of Council's agenda. The DSA on the City to Sea Bridge is 20%. We are doing a life safety assessment at the moment, and basically as soon as we know the outcome of that, we'll report back to Council on the outcome. So hopefully that will be before December, as is written here. The actual basement, or the Civic Square itself, the piece in the middle between the different buildings, the draft, we've had a draft DSA, it's at 20%. That's been peer reviewed, so the DSA has been done by the engineers Oricon. Becca has peer reviewed it. There's some debate between the two parties on the actual result of that DSA, but as it... Oh, sorry, a detailed seismic assessment. Sorry, my apologies. Detailed seismic assessment. So it's basically, Scott, you can define that.
Yeah, it's just comparing the strength of the building to the existing building code. Yeah. Yeah, it's just the detailed version of how to assess it.
Yeah. Yeah, so there was some debate regarding the results of that DSA, but both parties have now agreed that, irrespective of some of the technicalities in that debate, they both agree that the MBS is less than 33%, which means that we therefore have to do something, which is what we had planned to do and what we have provided for in the LTP. So we're intending to bring that back, the options for decision to Council on the 4th of September as well on the basement. And as mentioned before, that excellent question from Councillor McNulty, the reason that we want to progress that one quickly is because when we open the doors onto Matapihi and the upgraded gallery in February 26, we want people to be able to use the actual square itself. So that any strengthening work on the square needs to be done in that time frame, which we believe we can achieve. Great. The City Gallery DSA is 15%.
Sorry, James, can I just ask when an appropriate time might be for questions? Should we leave it a bit, or...?
Happy to take questions as you want, really, if you want to take them during the discussion.
We'll see how this one goes, just to flow. Sure. Councillor Free.
Well, I've been here long enough to sort of be a bit aghast at some of this new information. I know it's not brand new, but for example, we were always told the City Gallery was like fine, and the Michael Fowler Centre was reasonably fine, like 70%. City Gallery was kind of like right up at the standard. And now we're looking at figures that say that we could be up for some more expensive work. And it's getting terribly worrying, really. Why is there such a discrepancy in what we were told in the past and what we're now hearing?
It's an independent seismic.
Okay. Okay, so just on the gallery, Councillor, the work that needs to be done to get the DSA back above 33% is actually quite minor work. So we can do that as part of our planned maintenance upgrades of that building anyway.
Okay.
So it's one of the things I've learned as a layperson to this field is a DSA or a result of a DSA can be less than 33%, but there could be multiple different factors that cause it to drop down, and they will take the lowest factor in terms of the overall DSA assessment. So it may well be that with a DSA there is an element that can be addressed to get the DSA result, overall result higher if you address that particular item. That's definitely the case with this one.
Yeah, and it was, Councillor Freed, that was included in the last Ngākau update.
Yeah, no, I have seen it before, but I'm just asking the question now. In the Michael Fowler Centre, is that going to be an easy fix or an expensive fix?
So I'll come to that in a moment.
Okay,
Is that right?
all right.
Yep.
Councillor Randall?
Yeah, it's just a related thing. I mean, I understand it is complicated and these numbers move even with the change of standards. So I just wanted to just get a more general comment on the public safety issue that's related to these DSAs in terms of, because often they're related more to building integrity and such like, as opposed to it actually being truly unsafe. And so I just note that the Michael Fowler Centre is still being used. So can you provide a comment on the public safety side of the Michael Fowler Centre? Or not necessarily now, but maybe when you get to it. You don't have to answer it, but I think that needs to be answered during the session.
Okay, I'll answer that one in a minute, Councillor.
Cool.
Thank you.
And then last question from Councillor Pannett.
Yeah, the City Gallery, just following up on Councillor Free and my earlier comment from another workshop. So really, this is 10 years old, and even if you fix it, going to 33%, it just does possibly show there's problems with the regime, right? So I guess the question is that we will take that representation to the Minister in the earthquake-prone building review. I think it needs to happen because we did a big upgrade. It should not need to be done within 10 years, and the legislation at least was designed to try and stop this happening. So we shouldn't have to be doing such a big job, because even 33% is not great, right?
I think my colleague, the Chief City Planning Officer, is intending to do that in terms of taking our feedback back into that process. Yeah.
Well, I'd even ask whether we could take that further and to say, do we actually have to do the work? Like, is it really that much weaker after 10 years?
So in this case, in the City Gallery case, correct me if I'm wrong, there is a particular piece of masonry wall that's been put inside the gallery as a partition, in essence, right? And if you can get rid of that, then the DSA rises above 33% and we're all fine.
But that's not good enough. As this is a IL3 building, we need a higher level of resilience. So what would it need then to go up higher?
It's probably worth us coming back and explaining what removing that masonry wall will do as part of this City Gallery scope. Because obviously you get rid of a wall that might be, say, 25%, and that might mean the next thing's 45%, but we don't have the number here with us about what that's going to do.
Okay, so some more detailed information, because I think we should be trying to go as resilient as possible, but not if we're having to do this every 10 years.
It's getting a bit.
I'll take one more question from Councillor Young, and then we'll finish the presentation just in case questions get answered. She's online.
Okay, thank you. Just want to ask about the City Gallery, following up from Iona's questions. So, assuming that you remove that wall, why is it not going to be until the end of 2026? No, not the end. 2026 before it's finished, because I mean that's such an important gallery for New Zealand, quite apart from Wellington. And we've got, I know they're having exhibitions all around the place, but it's such a significant part of our cultural ecosystem. And 2026 is a long way away.
Fair question, Councillor. The work that needs doing on the gallery is an amount of deferred maintenance. So in essence, a backlog of maintenance. As we've attempted to keep it open as much as we possibly can, we've built up a backlog of maintenance that needs doing. And given the fact that this wall needs to be attended to, it's a good idea to do all of it at once and have just a one-off impact on the gallery, which at the moment has been challenged as a result of all the other construction going on around it, particularly to Matapihi. So it's kind of an opportune moment to do the work, and if possible, it can be done sooner than an opening date in February 26. But what we were thinking of was, from a project perspective, making sure that it is completed at least by that point, so that we have the two completed basically at the same time.
But just with this deferred maintenance, how many buildings do we have this issue of deferred maintenance? Because it sounds like we're not very good property owners.
Sorry, I can't comment on that at the moment. We can take that away as a question.
Thank you.
Okay, so the work, you'll be pleased to hear, has actually started for the gallery in terms of scoping, and we expect to get that done as soon as possible over the next 12 plus months, right? The creche is now vacant. The future of that piece of structure depends on the development plan and the bridge in capital E, and probably primarily on the bridge in capital E. If we have to do something fairly radical with the bridge in capital E, then that almost by necessity means that we have to address the remainder of that ramp and the creche next to it as well. So further information on that will become evident as we go through the development plan. Ngākau Centre, so we have got a NMBS 20% on that building. Again, the regulatory date for resolution of that is 2029, but we're anticipating an additional 4 years. We are starting to look at various different options on that building. As I was mentioning this morning, the main issue appears to be the ground and foundations, and we are obviously well experienced with that piece of ground, having been working in the town hall area. So we are, I guess, conservative at this point in our estimates of what is needed and what it might cost. And what that means is probably an unrealistic or unaffordable amount. However, what we have the opportunity to do now as we go through the options is to kind of figure out what other alternate schemes may be possible for the MFC, and if there is a way for us to remediate the building in a fashion that's affordable or fits with our financial commitments and plans. So we should have that information before the middle of next year to present back to Council. Yeah, go for it.
I think one of the earlier questions was just around the difference between DSAs and whether things are safe to occupy. And so one of the things that Council's doing is occupational safety assessments. And so there's one for the MFC for it to continue to stay open in the meantime.
And then the final element of Ngākau's Civic Square is the Jack Islet Green, which we have no plans whatsoever at the moment for that piece of land. Cool, just moving ahead to Matapihi. Project on track and within budget. Opening schedule for February 26, as I mentioned. Key progress since we last updated Council, Scott?
Yeah, so the rattle space and the ground floor slab, there's a huge amount of work happening in those spaces and the foundations. LTs are really cracking on through that work and hitting their dates really well, which is fantastic to see. The interior fit out works are starting to happen on the inside of the building. All things are going well. Carpentry's happening everywhere. You know, there's 150 people on site, so lots of really good positive things. We've also now finalised all of the pricing for the job with the landscape now all confirmed. Do you want to do the VUW bit?
Sure, and I think I would just underline that last point about the work was broken into what we call separable portions or chunks of work and contracted that way with the contractors. All of those have now been confirmed, so in essence it's fixed price. The whole job is now fixed price, so we have a lot more confidence now around the final price and how much contingency we may or may not need to use on that. So our certainty around price and cost now is, I don't know if I could...
Good, I think.
Yeah, it's good.
It's good.
Yeah. Okay, so just about Victoria University. So I think you're all aware from communication that I've sent out that Victoria is not going to be using levels 3 and 4 of Te Matapihi. We went through a lengthy process starting around about October last year where we brainstormed ideas for where Victoria University's, and before I go into this actually I should probably say two things. So the National Music Centre, there's two elements to it. One is the town hall element. So Victoria University is fully committed to the town hall element, and we are progressing the fit out and the work there according to our schedules. So that's all wonderful, and there's going to be a number of different spaces that Victoria University are utilising in the town hall, and it really will be the hub and performance space hub for their National Music Centre. What they also needed was some additional space, ideally around Ngākau, where they could put primarily a series of practice rooms and a few other common spaces as well. And that was the piece that we were seeing if we could fit into levels 3 and 4 of Te Matapihi. Initially, in the initial diagrams that were done over the Christmas period, it looked like it was feasible. But as we started working through a more detailed design with Victoria University, it became evident that there were a couple of elements such as the height of the ceilings in particular and the amount of square metre space they needed when you start trying to fit soundproof practice rooms into a space, which is like if your space is a box, you're putting another box inside it to have a soundproof practice room. So there's kind of box-in-box type requirement they had, plus the height that they wanted in the space as well. We just, quite frankly, couldn't quite make it work. And so ultimately Victoria University made the decision that that wasn't the best thing for them to pursue and that they'll look at some other options. In my conversations with them, I believe they have a person starting in their senior management team later this year who will be taking the lead on determining where to from here from them for those remaining spaces. So what we're now doing really is exploring alternate options for level 3 and 4. And there are some uses that we can make of it that are quite logical in terms of it being a library, that we could use the space to support the library distribution centre. What we were initially thinking is as we move into 68 and Jervois Quay, we would move the library distribution centre into there. But when you think about it logically, it's probably better to have all the books back in one place. There's obviously an efficiency gain to be achieved from that. The downside of that is that if we were to lease out that space on levels 3 and 4, obviously be able to earn an income like we were intending to do with Victoria University. However, that's mitigated by two things. One, that potentially provides additional space then in the Jervois Quay building, which we can then look at potentially using for CCOs or something like that. which is one of the things I think that was brought up when we did the LTP. I think you, Councillor Free, asked whether or not we could look at seeing if there was space in that building for some other council functions. So that creates that opportunity. And the second consideration is that we have stepped into partnerships on Te Ngākau as per the Te Ngākau framework, which is Council decided in the Te Ngākau framework that it would be unlikely that Council itself could fund all development in Te Ngākau, and therefore we should look for opportunities to bring in some private sector investment into the square as well, which is in essence what has been done on the MFC car park and in the cab mob space with Precinct Properties. Now, with those two partners coming in and their plans, if we are then to try and lease out levels 3 and 4, we're in essence directly competing. So we need to consider these things, or you need to consider these things when coming to a decision on what we should do with levels 3 and 4. We need to do a little bit more work on the options and the costs, etc., and then we'll bring that back to you for decision. Okay, I'll move on to the Town Hall. Scott.
Cool. So the project is on track to be completed in 2026, so that's our target date. We haven't yet to firm anything in stone, but things are looking positive and construction work is definitely improving on site. We're progressing well and clearing the blockages from the project, allowing the contractor to work in almost all spaces. Further down in the presentation, I'll cover that in a bit of graphical detail. Progress on construction since we last gave you an update. So the basement slab has now been complete, which is a really big milestone for the project. The basement is probably the trickiest piece of below ground works in the job, and we've basically finished the last pour for that slab at the moment. So it's really good as we get out of the ground. It's going to help the Town Hall continue at pace. The auditorium ceiling's nearing completion, which is a really nice big piece of heritage space that will be done and mean we don't have to get back up there and get at that again. Reinstatement of key heritage areas. So one of the things we talked about in October last year is being able to open up trades to make the building good again so that it can be used. So plasterers are in there working at full steam. The pressed metal ceiling teams are in there. Basically, we've got a whole lot of new trades in there working really fast, which is really appreciated. Works are nearing completion in the E1 ground floor, so it's nice to see some spaces actually nearing completion, while there are other spaces that have got work to do still. And the facade works are well underway. If anyone's been in the square lately, you can see the big white facade on the north side of the building, which is fantastic to see. Some of the updates from our review in October. So. Commercial closeout variations was a key action within our recommendations. As an example here, we've settled a big chunk of smaller variations with nailers, which has made it's much easier to get over the line and give the project a lot more cost certainty. We're continuing to do that with small packages of commercial, basically instructions to keep that process moving. So definitely say there's been a lot of progress on that front. Continuing to work with Naylor to open up work faces. So again, I'll come to that graphical representation over the page. And the design of all remaining areas will be complete by late August. So the last remaining key area is the West Hall, which connects MOB, or the old MOB, to the Town Hall. And that will basically open up that last part of the building for completion. Master program will remain construction works with all of October 2023, and we're looking at all options to bring the program forward to make this work. Cool, so we can jump over to the next slide. So this is a representation that we use for our internal board reporting. Basically, the picture on the left is representing where we were in April in terms of areas. Basically, red areas are areas where the contractor can't work because they don't have design information as a result of changes, largely from changes in October last year. The orange areas are restricted workflow where there have been challenges. Maybe it's an existing building issue or needing further information, but basically contractor hasn't been able to work at full steam. And green represents areas where they're now progressing at full steam. And so you can see really positively between April and August, things are moving really well, and the space is really opening up, with really only that west hall being the key activity to break open the space and really be able to work across the whole town hall. So if we just keep flicking through the slides, you can see different floors. So that was the ground floor. This is level 1. Again, you can see a lot more green, a lot less red. The next page will be level 2. The key being here is just VUW committing to the project and being able to open up their space. And here, blue represents the completion of the roof. So there's a lot of the building's been a lot of the roof has been completed, and really just that southern corner of the building is left to be closed out. Oh, and also the basement, which is now going full steam with the concrete pours now complete there.
Thanks, Scott. And just finally, obviously it's a noisy and challenging environment if you live and work around Ngākau at the moment, especially when there's demolition going on, as well as 2 construction projects. What we've tried very hard to do is to reach out to as many of the stakeholders in the vicinity as we can, speak to them face to face, speak to them when they ask to be spoken to as well. So when they ring us up and say, can we talk about such and such, we are happy to do that. We've distributed documentation. We've tried to make it very clear what our plans and timeframes are. We are taking it very seriously, the noise levels. We're measuring the decibels at times of day, etc., making sure that we're within the consented agreements. So I think the team overall is trying its very best to mitigate the impact on the neighbours of everything that's going into Ngākau, but it's obviously a big, large-scale construction project, so it's going to be challenging for a little while. What we always try and say is when it's finished, it will be so amazing, it's going to add a lot of value to whatever business or property you've got in the space. Take questions?
Great. We have a bit of a list. We'll start with Deputy Mayor Foon.
Kia ora, just a couple of questions on MFC, just looking at the timeframe 2029, does that include the 4 years that the government granted, extra 4 years for?
No, that would be on top.
That, so that would take us to 33?
Correct.
Yep. Do you have a guesstimate range, price range for remediation? Like,
It's
really rough?
It's kind of too early, to be honest, because, sorry, Councillor Deputy Mayor, we asked QS to give us some ballparks before, actually towards the end of last year, when we were looking at preparing the LTP, and the lack of information, lack of uncertainty, and the conservative approach as a result of what we've experienced on Town Hall led to those estimates being extremely high, and ultimately that's why, and that was the same also for City to Sea Bridge as well.
Yeah.
And so, so we have time to deal with Michael Fowler Centre, so that's why we thought we'll do that in 2025, and we'll look at it, and we'll spend the time to really look at options and schemes. And I'm constantly getting approached by various different engineering companies saying, hey, we think we can do it, and blah, blah, blah. So we're looking, we've got a process to go and look at all of those things. So I think it would just be, it wouldn't be helpful for me to kind of tell you what those initial sums were.
I can't help but ask. Sorry. Thank you.
Councillor Pennant.
Thanks. Sorry, just going back to Ngākau. Long concerns about green space in the area. So it's good in a way that we're not dealing with Jack Islet Green and putting a building on it. Where is your thinking at now about how we're going to increase the green space? Because there's quite a lot of recommendations over the years, wanting more.
I would like to reserve that question until we go through the development plan, because the development plan does address that. And the development plan looks at various different options for Ngākau, and it weights those against various different criteria, one of those being more green space. So if you want more green space, then here's some options that you can do in Ngākau.
Okay.
So it's probably best to go through it when we have that conversation.
As long as it's on the agenda, that's good. It is a little bit off topic, but while you're here too, it's the second crate that we have emptied out in quite a short space of time. I'll maybe take that offline with you, James, but, you know, our kids need to be cared for somewhere, and we're now, that's the second one. Yeah. Okay. The City to Sea Bridge. Look, I know there was some discussion this morning. Wasn't a lot of time. I'm presuming there will be quite a large public backlash on this one, I would have thought. So your basic comms, the question is it's going to be around cost? Because, because I've got long history here, that access to the waterfront is absolutely critical for people. You know, like it's just the easiest way to get across. You don't want to cross with a whole lot of traffic. It's got to be something much more beautiful. Wow.
Yeah, so again, the development plan does kind of talk through options on the City to Sea Bridge. The main challenges the DSA identified, detailed seismic assessment identified, were with the geotechnical aspects of the bridge. And on the bridge is supported by elements on either side of it, right? So one is the old Capital E building, which has got a very low DSA, and there is no, quite frankly, the only options there probably are to fill it with dirt or pull it down. And then on the seaside, the weakness there is the seawall structure that it's standing on. So you would need to remediate that, which would be very difficult to achieve, to remediate the seawall around that lagoon. And that's what potentially makes the project extremely expensive. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, but that will definitely be part of the discussion in September with the development plan.
Cool. If I could just go back on the list afterwards, thanks.
Councillor Young.
No, I don't. I pull my hand down. Thank you.
Cool. Councillor Calvert.
Where is the NZSO taking space within the town hall and the library space?
Yes, definitely for the town hall, correct. Yeah. So the town hall has NZSO and Victoria University as tenants in there, correct. Yes.
Right. I thought they were looking for more space, so are they going into the library?
They are looking for more space, and that is an option.
Okay, all right. This council, what was the money we granted towards a fit out? If it was of this New Zealand School of Music, was that, did we give a grant? We had Dame Kerry Prendergast come and talk to us. Is that for the fit out? So is that going to go into the
town hall?
Into the town hall, not the library? Okay. Is there a debating chamber? I mean, I thought we were having a debating chamber, but is there a debating chamber in there?
Yes, there is a debating chamber. It's not intended to be used for council activities like it was previously 4 or 5 years ago, but it's still called the debating chamber and is largely used for UW's performances.
Okay, all right. Thank you. And can I just go back on the list? I've got another question. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Kia ora. Just for the town hall, when it says remains within budget, does that mean it remains within the 320 million upper limit of the budget, or do you have some good news you can give us there?
So if you can remember, Councillor, the 329 million included 28 million for an annex if we were not able to come to an arrangement with a third party to develop that piece of land. So on the assumption that we're able to move forward with the discussions with Precinct, then potentially that is not required.
Okay, so 300 mils probably, if that was to go through, 300 mils relatively. Okay. This is just purely operational. I know Sarah Rushon was on the Ngākau governance board, and now she's left Experience Wellington. Has someone else from EW stepped into that role, or has that role been filled?
She's staying on.
Oh, she is staying on. Brilliant. Oh, fantastic. That's good news. And finally, I guess with this discussion on the City to Sea Bridge, I think of the discussion that happening with the Petone Wharf up in Hutt City, where there's this idea a group could come in and fix it, at sort of 10% of what's necessarily been quoted. So are we going to investigate whether those alternatives are available before you bring that to us, so that we've got a pretty clear idea of what can and can't be done?
We're certainly looking at all of the options for the CDC bridge, yes. Before we bring them back to you, yes.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, the City to Sea Bridge, I thought we had voted not to have it and to look at a grade solution.
No, what happened in the LTP is that we didn't have an answer, we didn't have the information, and we didn't have the options for you to make a decision, and therefore we took a conservative approach and said, what is the potential lowest cost option, which would be a demolition, and we had that for the City Sea Bridge, Capital E, and the basement.
Because, I think we could frame this differently too, because I personally think there's a whole lot of advantages to not having that visual blockage between, there's a positive way of framing this, especially if the artwork can be repurposed. Personally, I think it's quite difficult to go up there and down again, and to have a really decent at-grade solution is probably quite a good thing. But,
I guess it's probably personal preferences, but certainly your point is true. An architectural artist's impression of what it could look like without that there is actually really nice.
Yeah, because you can see the sea then. It would be amazing, I reckon. But, just the positive framing would be, I reckon, worth doing. But my real question was about the council was meant to be getting a 25% usage of the town hall, because after all, a lot of public money's gone into it, hang of a lot of public money. How are we going to make sure that still happens with all the changes that have gone on, different plans for people to be here and there and everywhere else?
While there have been some changes to plans, generally speaking, it's pretty much as it always was in terms of the agreed usage of the building between the three parties, us, NZSO and Victoria University. So there hasn't really been any change from that perspective.
Can we start talking a bit more about the public access to this? Because it is costing a lot of money. I'd hate to see the public put this much money into it and not be able to actually get some use. So can we start talking more up front about what will be available for the public at the end of this? How can they use this expensive public building?
Yes, Councillor. I think as we start getting closer within, kind of 18 months time frame of completion, then the actual program for performances in the town hall will start taking shape, and I think at that point then you'll start to see manifested the amount of time available in that building for the public, for public performances that are nothing to do with NZSO or Victoria University, and you'll start to see how it's manifested our share of usage of that building.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions from the fine folks at Inner City Wellington. One of them was around sort of what input there would be towards the city to sea connection. I think, when we were talking about it this morning around, Te Ngākau more broadly, is there some sort of consultation or public input that could happen there?
So at this point, it's obviously up to council to decide, but at this point, we're suggesting that once you've seen the development plan, that is packaged up into a consultation, and that will deal with options around City to Sea Bridge.
Okay. And perhaps this is, I guess, a question more relevant for then, but just in terms of, the emergency management considerations that have happened across Te Ngākau, I guess both during the construction process, but also once it is completed, what it sort of looks like in terms of how we are responding to disasters in the city. Is the precinct helping us in that way?
Do you mean in a post-disaster function, or more like how to get fire trucks and ambulances?
Probably more in a post-disaster function, yeah.
Specifically, Te Matapihi wasn't designed in a way to be a central civil defence headquarters, but all those buildings are incredibly resilient, so they do have options for those kind of operational issues. But no, we didn't specifically design it for that.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Pennant.
Just question about the town hall. So we did have some arguments about the heritage elements. I was just wondering, we sort of ended up with it. I know you said you sort of reinstated it. just given the significance of the building. How'd you get on?
And you mean in terms of specifically reinstating what was there? Look, I think most of the visual, aesthetic components of the building will be continued to be maintained. So particularly the facade, which is listed and protected by Heritage New Zealand, that is all intended to go largely back as it was before, other than to make the base isolation system work. And in terms of the interior, again, most of the large components that you'll see, like the plasterwork in the auditorium or the main stairwell, will continue to remain the same. But some of those fiddly heritage requests, like keeping original timber in places that you can't see, are things that will have intended to be replaced by cheaper alternatives, like modern timber where you can't see it and those kind of things.
And that's all recorded for future reference?
100%. So yeah, we've got a heritage architect. It's all very detailed, and all of that's all in an infinite amount of detail. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. Given if we bring the town hall back on board to 2027, probably realistically, is it, or is it definitely going to be 2026?
We're targeting 2026.
Okay. So would that then reduce the need for the Michael Fowler Centre? I'm just wondering whether, when we're thinking about what we do with the Michael Fowler Centre, depending on the report that comes back, is that a consideration? It's not, we may not be comfortable with it, but is that a consideration?
So because the town hall will be completed almost certainly well before any replacement building on that mob cab site, noting that the replacement building on the mob cab site is intended to be a front of house entry point for the town hall and provide things like facilities and congregation space and things like that. When we first open the town hall, we won't have that. Therefore, we will need to rely on some of the front of house from MFC for a period of time with the town hall. So the timing of work done on MFC is relevant to the town hall and its completion, and also the precinct properties building completion as well.
Okay. And when officers do come back with a proposal what to do with the Michael Fowler Centre, will you also bring in a more looking at all the other performance venues in the city? Because I wonder whether we have to make a conscious decision with what venues we've got within the central city to and then what we can afford to do, and timing of what we can afford to do. So when you come to us, will you be able to bring in the bigger picture around performance venues?
Calvert, I can answer that. That's exactly what we're hoping to do.
No.
So we're doing a piece of work at the moment looking at what a city the size of Wellington needs by way of its entertainment venues. So as part of the options analysis, because we'll also have the Opera House that requires strengthening, the MFC, so we'll be looking at what the population needs, what the market forces are, all of those elements that would then feed into the business cases for the upgrades on entertainment venues that are required.
Okay, thank you.
And that brings us to the end of the briefing. Fabulous. Thank you, team.
Kia ora. Thank you.